Hats off to him. 19 million players in 2 weeks. Can't be wrong, right? Palworld has absolutely taken the world by storm. It demands attention. And now that the initial dramas have been dismissed and people have been able to sink their teeth into the game's full design and full progression, the player numbers just keep on growing. Because that's the thing. If this was a meme game that exploded, people would just wander off afterwards. That is not what's happening. This game is showing staggering retention, which is super impressive. So then, what is the secret that's allowed a tiny Japanese indie team to somehow sweep the industry off their feet? Well, today we're going to go through everything this game has got in its favor. We're going to deal with a little bit of the sort of post-analysis of the initial discussion around the game, and of course that Nintendo are apparently looking into things. And of course we can't put the research time in and do the analysis without your help, or the help, of course, of today's sponsor. You and your fellow viewers at Bellular.ghost.io. Seriously, you guys are helping us out a lot, and in return for your support over there, we've got Loading Screen, our daily newsletter that keeps you up to date on everything going on, early access to our videos, early access to our research reports. We've also set it up so there is a free trial whenever you sign up there as well, so you can have a little bit of a gander around to see what's up. It is the single best way that you can support our channel. It seriously makes a massive difference, and even just seeing you guys chat and hang out over at the Members Lounge Discord, honestly, that's just really cool. And by the way, for that, you get your invite right after you sign up. So thank you for your support, and with that said, let's go. Okay then, let's jump into where we left off. So in the last video, we discussed a lot of the accusations that were being leveled against the game and how each one of those accusations could be debunked. As an example, the what people were saying about AI. Now, there was the possible exception of base models being copied, and even then it would have been hard to prove without a shadow of a doubt. Now, a degree of misinformation has been spread on this story. The original claimant did not admit to altering the model in their accusation. A lot of people went to our video and said, hey, they actually manipulated the model and, they changed what it looked like to look similar. What they did is they linearly scaled the model to be the same size. So the PAL and the Pokemon were at the same scale so that the model itself could be compared. So essentially that is what they did. But that ultimately is the situation that it wasn't like they added, new geometry or they changed geometry so that the PAL would match the Pokemon. They just had the two of them match scale, which of course does facilitate the comparison, and you could say would make things more obvious. Again, it's the sort of thing we can probably, do that kind of mixture of straw man and steel man to sort of compare both. Anyway, that's what went on. But then, of course, what was interesting is Nintendo actually did step into the ring. This, I would say, is very likely because Nintendo basically had so much noise. So Nintendo released a statement, and their statement can essentially be summed up as them saying that they know about Palworld, that they will investigate anywhere they think there will be copyright infringement. P.S. Please, we get it already. You don't have to tell us anymore that Palworld exists. Of course, if you're Nintendo and Game Freak, you're probably also aware of Palworld's existence in more ways than just, some models are similar or some designs don't feel the most inspired. And again, Pokemon even being, inspired by other things or having great designs, that's been a whole discourse in the Pokemon community. I would certainly hope they take the right lesson from this and that they are inspired to maybe do better. Now, of course, after a massive hit like this happens, people try to work out why the hell it happened. So let's actually deal with this success. Number one, 19 million players. And if you're thinking it's just Game Pass, nope. 12 million copies have been sold on Steam. This is as of January 31st. Undoubtedly, that number is up, potentially by a few more million, which is mad. So 12 million in Steam, 7 million in Xbox, and that is, of course, Xbox Game Pass. We don't have a breakdown between Game Pass and people who have bought it on Xbox. That is amazing. Now, there's another survival game out there. It's called Enshrouded. We've talked about it as another early access survival game that is achieving a non-Palworld level of success. They are similar-ish. I mean, they're in a similar genre, they have similar release windows, similar prices, and they both did land their marketing and review cycle fairly well. Palworld was obviously the mainstay of game showcases. Enshrouded, well, it benefited from Steam Next Fest. Both games are ones taking a familiar formula and trying to put their own spin on it, and they're both from studios that have got multiple projects under their belt. And it's actually not like Enshrouded got completely destroyed. I mean, some could have worried that Enshrouded really would have been negatively hit. Now, you could say that more people would have played Enshrouded if it came out on its own. Of course, you know, it's hard to disprove something that hasn't happened. What I can say is no doubt that developer will be very happy because they have sold 4 million copies of Enshrouded in only a few days. Now, yes, Palworld has eclipsed nearly 5 times that figure, and in terms of raw sales in Steam, it's got triple that. But when you're putting an M after the number and you're dealing with millions of sales, I think 4 million is something you can be extremely happy with. Indeed, 4 million is, that's outselling many high-budget AAA games. So, critics-wise, well, both games aren't perfect, but we are looking at, a 73 top critic average for Enshrouded, a 69 for Palworld, with less recommendations for Palworld. But there I would say that there's a little bit of a difference between the critic playing something and saying, okay, I'm going to play this, I'm going to analyze what it's like. Both of these games, you can say, are a solid 7 out of 10. Basically. Now, of course, there's loads of 7 out of 10s that I won't touch because I won't be interested in them. A lot of people would say that Ark is a bit of a 7 out of 10 game, with all of its jank, but people still love it and play it. I think that's basically the thing. Something can be a 7 out of 10 critical hit and a 95% hit on Steam because a player saying, I'm happy with my purchase or I'm not happy with my purchase in Steam is very different to a critic giving something a rated score. As an example, that's why Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic will be fairly different looking for so many films. Ultimately, then, these are both what you could call hyper successes, but to call them both hyper when Palworld has got so many more sales, it almost reminds me of the situation with hyper coasters over in Roller Coaster Land, where there's so many hyper coasters that people are like, okay, we're going to invent the Giga Coaster, and then we're going to go for the Strata Coaster. So I suppose, well, going to call Palworld a strata success and Enshrouded a hyper success. Now, to go into the external factors then, there are some relevant things. So, Palworld and Pocket Pair have got a good relationship with Xbox. This is one that has, of course, resulted in the biggest third-party game launch of the year, and it's a special relationship that's actually now getting them faster patches and additional support. Of course, Xbox are seeing it's winning, and they want their players on Game Pass to have a great experience. So, it was on Game Pass at launch, it was across the Xbox consoles, it was also, by the way, on the Xbox One. That's many different eyeballs that, of course, Enshrouded wasn't able to get. Then there's that Pocket Pair as a company have already delivered this type of game to a happy audience. As an example, Craftopia exists, and it's still in early access. There's a built-in fan base there, and the company has had experience actually doing a game like that. In fact, there are many sort of farming factory / slave labor memes that also do apply to the marketing of like that game, but instead with Zelda-like monsters. And the success of that also meant they were able to spend more money in development here. The CEO's blog states this, quote, "It's not known how much money it cost. I don't even want to see it. Judging from Craftopia sales, it's probably around 1 billion yen, that's $6.7 million, because all that money is gone." I mean, that is pretty much an Isle approach to company accounts. It's like, what was the budget of the game? I don't know. But about $7 million is gone, so I suppose we could say it's that. Okay, then of course it's got an approachable premise and a art style on the surface, right? Patrick Klepek of Crossplay kind of realized that this is a game that would actually sell to kids pretty damn well. Quote, "I like that it's all the games that I like combined. It's like Fortnite and Minecraft and Sea of Thieves with Pokemon. It's got the graphics of Sea of Thieves, the building exploring of Minecraft, and from Fortnite it's got the glider, it's got the guns." Quote, Maggie, 10 years old. The idea there being that to a lot of that younger audience that doesn't have all of our experience and isn't looking at it with that cynical, analytical sort of critic's eye, well, they're just going to see a mashup of everything they think is cool in one place. Is a kid going to think like, the artistic cohesion of this pal holding a realistic AK-47? They're not going to look at that and think it's a problem. They're going to go, haha, gun, cool fun. And that's kind of how it works. And this idea mashup of things that people like, well, we just talked about that recently with the success, air quotes, of the Day Before's marketing, where the Day Before was saying, hey, we know you've liked The Last of Us, we know you like The Division, we think you would like the driving mechanics of Splint Tires, and hey, here's yoga pants and a Lambo because you all like GTA Online as well. And obviously that led to it being the most wishlisted game in Steam. The difference here is that with Palworld, the plan actually worked. The game came out and people could play it. As well, Palworld's a better game than people expected. I mean, I remember when it was more the days of just like, oh, meme game has exploded. And, I walked into the shop, one of the guys at the shop, he's a viewer, he was talking about playing Palworld, and he kept on going on about like just all of the crazy things like blew his mind that, this game could do. For me, it was really interesting. I'm like, wow, it has all of those dungeons. It has this, it has that. What's that about human meat? All of that. It's crazy. Unlike the day before, it actually delivers. Some would even say it over-delivers on its premise. So essentially, if you already knew about the game, it was a bit of a meme. People were saying Pokemon with guns. People were saying, hey, imagine Pikachu slavery. That's what we're going to do. And I mean, there is natural mimetic spread there. But of course, another point of that's pointed out by Aftermath, and certainly it rings true with my childhood, is that the big, super gross, gory, violent take on something that, is otherwise like appealing to your age demographic when you're younger, that catches on. Do you remember the Happy Tree Friends? I remember the Happy Tree Friends. I had the Happy Tree Friends on my iPod. The iPod Mini had a little screen you could play the things. So if you grew up in the 2000s, the Happy Tree Friends. If you grew up maybe a bit more recently, it's maybe Five Nights at Freddy's, that sort of thing. Indeed, the whole SCP thing taking off with younger audiences, even though a lot of the SCP games, they're pretty spooky, pretty gory, whatever. And that makes a lot of sense. And we know that the memery sells. Like Lethal Company, Goat Sim, all of that. And the thing is, if a AAA game has any problems, well, it's already below expectations because it's AAA. I mean, even I was just listening to SkillUp's review of the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. And a lot of his point is like, you asked for $100 to play this on day one. What the hell did you think would happen? And that's basically the point, where that game under-delivers and disappoints. Palworld being cheaper and, being indie, and because it's a meme game, that likely meaning people had a lower expectation, that means that Palworld was near perfectly primed to actually surprise and delight people, and it absolutely did. Another thing that makes a lot of these mimetically potent games successful is their inherent streamability. This is an absolutely major thing. I mean, Lethal Company, humongous on streams. Looking at Palworld, I mean, its viewership is absolutely staggering. 59 million hours. Peak viewers of 433,000. That's beyond AAA. Average viewers, 150,000. That is mad. And even when you're looking at the very initial numbers for February, they don't represent a humongous fall off. You still have peak viewers of 100,000 and average viewers of like 66, 67,000. That is still really strong. And compare that to Enshrouded. It's, of course, been out for a week less, but proportionately, it did not hit nearly as hard on the streams, even though, I mean, you could say it did do fairly well. And hey, they sold 4 million copies. More power to them. I'm sure they're pretty happy about that. And to really drive home how big this is, this was in January reaching figures that would comfortably have it sitting at under half of the really major behemoths like GTA 5. That is mad. Pair that with a Steam algorithm that has that at the top of the charts. Of course, also, it's a genre that does super well. You have the most natural virality that you could really possibly see for a game. Now, with that then, who's actually playing Palworld? This is where it's interesting. So 19 million people means a lot of people have tried it. Now, we already know from the cross-play post that it's appealing to all ages, but thanks to Game Discover Co., we can actually work out a little bit more. So here are Steam owners by country, and you can see a third of that is China. The game is actually owned by more people in China than in the United States. And that makes a lot of sense. Just look at the populations. Then next up, you're looking at Germany, France, Canada, Japan, UK, Korea, Brazil, Australia, Russia, Hong Kong. Fascinating when you actually look into it for games like this. Now, this data was from Steam on the 24th of January, assuming that it's a broadly proportionate thing though, and applying that to our 12 million figure, that means it sold about 4.37 million copies in China, just over 2.5 million in the UK. Yeah, pretty damn big. And if you look at the Steam reviews, you can actually filter by language. You can see, your language for us would be English. You're dealing with 82,000 reviews. All languages though is 191,000 reviews. So you're really seeing that this is just appealing worldwide. I think that does make a hell of a lot of sense, like the sort of cute Pokemon style characters, they play really well globally. Now, of the 12 million, not everybody's actually played the game, and this is where Steam achievements can be really fun for doing tracking, because the beginning of the Legend Steam achievement is for capturing your first pal. That is pretty much like one of the first things you'll be doing in the game. It's the whole conceit of the game. So with that, we can pretty much say that 83.1% of the people of that 12 million have picked up the game and played. Now, of course, it doesn't matter to Pocket Pair, they're getting paid either way. And with all of this, well, I've got a funny analogy that I just kind of cooked up in my head. Well, it's a little bit like some parts of Old Blizzard. Old Blizzard would make things approachable and then have a legendary level of polish. Obviously, that legendary level of polish is not something you see here, but the idea of making those things approachable and then putting them into a game like this has meant that they've been able to harness the inherent strengths of so many other video games without suffering from, of course, the complexity of some of those games. I mean, I have a little bit of a philosophy. Now, this philosophy comes from playing Minecraft with Tekkit when I was a kid, but basically, if you add in industry, automation, and those things into your game, I guarantee you will cause damage to me and I will play it more. There's something about that loop that is digital crack to me. And that's really one of the things that they've been able to successfully do here. So let's actually dive into it then. Survival games can be very intimidating if you're a newer player. I mean, there's the inherent jank, but of course PvP elements that exist in, say, a Rust or an Ark, right? That can lead to a lot of griefing, a lot of that stuff. I mean, bad things happening when you're not on your server. Palworld doesn't have that. It has zero PvP, and by default, it lets people lock their base down so that other people cannot alter their base. And that's also something that Enshrouded does. It's got a co-op approach to worlds rather than basically allowing for combat early on. And what this does is it de-risks the earlier hours of the game. It lets people settle in, and it's, I mean, the opposite of, if you've ever heard the idea of like the, you know, the EVE Online learning curve, where it's just a vertical line. A lot of that is kind of like the opposite here. You could also imagine a sort of anxiety curve that exists in games, and I think these are both games that have a way lower anxiety curve. Then, of course, with Palworld, well, that de-risking of things is kind of happening more and more because very early on, your pals are doing a lot of busy work for you. That's really cool. Now, it's a primer for the complex industrial gameplay that will happen later on, but in the first few hours, well, what it means is you feel a great sense of freedom. You let them go and work, which is inherently satisfying. You go, you explore, you see the world, you catch more pals. And then after you've essentially, and maybe this is almost taking some of the ideas of an extraction-based game, the idea of, you know, there's, you know, your base, stuff's kind of successful there, you're setting up your little micro-industry, then you go out, you bring all the loot home, you then build up your base more. It's a very, very fundamental session-based gameplay loop that works. Even Sons of the Forest is doing something similar here, where it's got an NPC who can do things for you, but in the case of that game, the NPC has got to be a bit more player-directed, whereas here, the player can step in, but otherwise, the pals just get to work, you know, kind of autonomously. So what that does is it removes a lot of the tedium and busy work for the early hours of a game like that, and I think it allows people to more smoothly get to where the game's systems and complexity are really going to be driving that like longer term buy-in, right? That longer, you know, just like tail for the game, which is something that we've seen in those Steam numbers, which have stayed remarkably high for a long time. And then, of course, it's just every system, every mechanic in Palworld has appeared in another video game. And this is something that critics will generally be a little bit more harsh over because it's not really that innovative in what it's doing, but you can be innovative in how you bring otherwise, you know, sort of normal things together. Like a lot of people would say, again, it's like the handy example with Apple. What do Apple do? Do they invent things? I mean, sometimes sure, but, you know, core features, it's probably appeared in a Samsung phone a few years ago. But what the Apple approach is to, bring it together in a way that will just be polished, usable, and integrated. So really, just because something isn't super innovative, that doesn't mean that people won't like it. In fact, there are times where it can help. And this is where I can just go to the experience of Connor. So there's 4 team members working on this channel specifically. Of us, he's the one that's put, like, by far the most into Palworld. And, like, yeah, he ran into some problems, ran into some bugs, ran into mechanics. And the thing was, though, he was able to overcome those bugs, so they weren't necessarily much of a problem, and for a lot of those other mechanics, well, they were fairly easy for him to understand because he'd already seen them in other games. So while you certainly will lose some points for not being as innovative, what you do actually get is easier access to a larger market because people are already used to what your game is doing. That means Instead of being lost or confused, what they're going to be focusing on is, what can I do in this game? How can I express myself via these mechanics that I already understand? And that is a massive superpower for a game like this. And I suppose finally, there is the Pokemon angle. One of the things that I think Palworld would have been able to trade off is not Pokemon on guns, or with guns, that's like the kind of meme thing, but it is a large amount of dissatisfaction that exists with Pokemon. So many people want to love Pokemon, but obviously, at least from a visual level, often very disappointing. I will say, actually, Arceus was way better than I thought. I mean, Arceus looks ridiculous. It should not look like that. You can get better out of a Switch, but I actually thought it was, in terms of like core gameplay, probably modern Pokemon at its best, but even that, the bar's not particularly high. Because at best what Palworld is an auto-battler where you're taking like direct control of some of the characters, a little bit more similar to like, say, an Arceus. But the core like party RPG gameplay is absolutely not, it's not the same. So then you might think, well, why are so many reviews just calling this, the Pokemon that, players deserve? Or, why are Game Freak not making this? And honestly, it's a pretty damn simple thing. You could say that people have went to the hardware store and wanted to buy a milkshake. They're not going to get what they want from the store that they're going to, and in this case, that store is Game Freak. Essentially what's happened, right, is Pokemon fans have wanted Pokemon to grow with them, rather than stay the same and always be targeted at that younger age group. Now, I'm not advocating for, an 18+ R-rated Pokemon with blood. No, not at all. But maybe the point there that you keep it being a game that everybody can play, but you allow for, a bit more of that complexity. You actually just try to, be more innovative. But ultimately, it's that lack of innovation within Pokemon that has fundamentally held it back. The thing is, though, because the fan base has been so diehard, Game Freak have not really been punished for their lack of innovation. Certainly, I like the direction that Arceus is going in. I wish that Scarlet and Violet had more Arceus-like gameplay instead of trying to merge Arceus with the older sort of combat design of a more traditional Pokemon game. But I think that's basically the thing. Like, why did Pokemon spend so long in 2D even when spin-offs had moved to 3D? Why did they not try to push the envelope? Why did they not try to expand what Pokemon was so that whenever people are maybe, say 25 or 30 and want some more Pokemon, they can have something that they would like instead of something that is, you could say, overly targeted to a 10-year-old. Now, obviously, this is not excusing like performance issues or any of that either, Palworld or Pokemon have, but for me, it's just that core thing of like, what does an audience actually want? And how is the holder of the intellectual property able to like meet that demand? That's an interesting thing across many companies who hold intellectual property, some of which we may enjoy quite a bit, but then don't do a good job of giving us things that we want. The success of Palworld is it's bringing everything together, and it is giving people something that will be of interest to them if they enjoy Pokemon, but something that Pokemon, thus far, has fundamentally not been interested in providing them. That's why I don't play Pokemon. I have not played Pokemon in a very, very long time. I used to love Pokemon as a kid. But what happened is, they kept on making Pokemon, and, I bought X and Y. I bought the ones that were the Hawaii-inspired place as well. The Hawaii one, it's like, it was such an extended tutorial for like the first hour and a half. Oh my god, the games were so boring. There was no innovation. I mean, yeah, there'd be a thing that's different, like a Dynamax, but I never felt like they were interested in making a game that I would enjoy, even though, back in the day, I would have been buying all the Pokemon games. And when I look at this, would I enjoy Palworld more than what a modern Pokemon entry is? Yeah, because it's got automation and base building in it, and I love Factorio, I love playing Tekkit, I really want to play Satisfactory, it's got those elements that I know I like. I think, really, we can now understand why Palworld was so successful. Certainly, we could understand how it's some of its principles could be emulated and perhaps improved upon. And I think we also understand really the massive missed opportunity that is there with Game Freak. Game Freak have gotten away with murder because of the strength of the Pokemon brand. I don't know if this will change anything, but I would at least hope that this is a wake-up call. That a Pokemon game that is more different to like a traditional Pokemon RPG than Scarlet and Violet is. That's way more different. That's trying a different type of gameplay. That is something that people would really like. Like, what is a Pokemon ranching, farming, or whatever game going to be like? I mean, you could actually see so much potential there if you were to do a Pokemon farming game, like the sorts of Pokemon that could help you run your farm, all the things that you could do in a game like that. It would probably do really, really well. Of course, market validated by the likes of, your Stardew Valleys and, having some of your automation gameplay in there with the Pokemon. You could just evidently see that actually working. You could see a more like, combat focus, but, yada, yada, yada. But they've just been fundamentally uninterested in doing it. And I mean, some of their games have just been living memes when they've came out. There's also that. So there you go. That's the situation. Look, there's a lot that can be learned from this. And as much as I think there are some creative critiques that you can make of Palworld, it would be very unwise to not look at it, to not analyze it, and to not try to work out, why is it successful? Why is this actually, at the end of the day, bringing people joy, which is ultimately what our job as game creators should be. So that's it for this video. Check out this one next. We're pretty much doing daily content, so hit that sub button. With that said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you over there.